Sure. My name's Brian Hamaoui. I am one of the podcast hosts for GuestX podcast. I've been in the industry for about 20 years. I started back in 2008 as a property manager in the Orlando, Florida market. And then from there, I built some guest experience applications for the industry. One of the leading technologies that did some of the first integrations with activity providers. And then I met my fantastic host, Matthew Loney, in the process, and we decided to start a podcast for the industry, opening up people's eyes to guest experience and what it means, and starting to uncover what everybody's doing.
Yep. And my name is Matthew Loney. I'm the president and CEO of Explory. We're now the largest guest experience solution provider to the vacation rental industry in the U.S. Been doing that for about 6 years now. So my tenure in vacation rental is a little shorter than my host, but we share a passion for guest experience, and that's really where the podcast kind of originated. I think both Brian and I were kind of fascinated on how some companies are able to really instill guest experience in their culture, that it's part of the product that they deliver. And so we thought it'd be really interesting to be able to interview these experts. And really, we're starting off in vacation rental, but I think our intent is to really look across industries, whether it be within restaurants, manufacturing, wherever it be, but companies that kind of have excelled because of this culture around the guest experience. And then find out what technology and kind of human initiatives they're using to continue to drive that forward.
I think that makes a lot of sense. I think expanding on that, how do we implement that into our industry? Yep. Learning from those experts, taking whether it's technology or their approach to human interaction and how they achieve that with their internal staff and their members and influence them to create a better guest experience. It's not all driven by automation. Oh, well, that's a really good question. Actually, during the pandemic, I think what it's given people is the ability to take a bit of pause and really start to focus internally on what guest experience really means within their companies, and then learning from people around them. Because a lot of people had time to sit at home and do research and investigate new technologies and new processes, I think a lot of people have started to integrate the meaning of guest experience according to what the company means, their values, and implement different things. I don't think that guest experience is something, what we're finding, that's universal. It means something a little bit different to every company and every executive. And so it's really finding what that core value means, and then how do you deliver that experience to the guest in the end result.
Yeah, I think from a COVID standpoint, Paul, it may be a little bit of I don't think as much has changed probably as people. There's been a few permanent changes. The move to locks, which was already happening, I think it was accelerated. I think some of the other guest experience initiatives that were really driven by COVID, we'll see if those are long-lived. But I do think that it's continued to put an added emphasis just on that, how a guest feels staying in a property. And I think the rush to vacation rentals as kind of these freestanding units which allow you to almost isolate with a family, probably the popularity has increased, and with that has come people who come from other lodging sectors. So you guys cover hotels. Hotels, people who have stayed predominantly in hotels have the expectation of a guest experience that hotels deliver. And I think as a vacation rental, as an industry, we're still chasing that a little bit. How do you provide that similar type guest experience, but in a property that is very authentic and changes from one to the next, is an interesting hurdle that we're still, I think, having to cross.
I think I'll add one more piece, which is the technology that we've developed. We've developed an awful lot of things in the last few years. what we're trying to study now is what works, what doesn't work, and the consolidation piece, and really starting to flush out what it means for us operationally. Can we sustain it, and how do we make it easier for people to implement things all together so that it's one ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, one was to help promote VITUR. We certainly want to do that to the U.S. market. I don't think it's a conference that's real well known yet, and also give a majority of our listeners right now are in our stateside, so we want, but there is a strong interest with how is the European market doing. What things are different. What can we learn from them from a guest experience standpoint? So we thought this is a great place to get together. There's a ton of major players, Interhome. We've talked to a number of the technology companies, and understanding what they're doing and trying to convey that back to some listeners. I think that was a primary focus for sure.
Yeah, I think it's one of the largest, oldest industries here in the European market. And there's a lot of, we pioneer a lot of stuff in the United States. We like to think we pioneer a lot of things, but there's a lot that we can learn from the history that they have here. It's probably one of the largest and oldest industries here. So if we can come to this industry and talk to some of the leading executives and really get into their mindset of what's next, what are they applying, how are they applying it, and then also talk to them about the conference and what takeaways they have going into the future, I think we can learn a lot in the U.S. With our customer base on things to come. Yeah, I think honestly it's one of the coolest events that I've been to. And I said it earlier in one of our podcasts, it's a shame that people couldn't see the way that they put the experience together, especially with the sample House of the Future. But being able to touch and feel and then see people's reactions on how they've taken the vacation rental experience and put it into a platform where everybody can enjoy it. It's a much smaller event than we're used to in the US. It's very
intimate.
It's very intimate, and it feels really good. Yeah. So I think we've also had the ability to talk to some of the leading industry people, which in some of our bigger conferences is very hard to do. So we've had the opportunity to just sit down and learn.
Yeah, I think one of my takeaways is I need to learn more languages.
I think so too.
I feel like I'm one of the few people who doesn't speak multiple. It's not enough to, I don't know if it's possible to learn German, French, and Spanish all at the same time. But no, it's been fascinating. In a lot of ways, the industries are very similar. It's a tight-knit group. We're used to being U.S. industry, U.S. trade events where I know 90% of the people there. So it was fun to come, but how quickly they embrace you, and knowing that you're in the industry is really fun. I think from a professional standpoint, I think they're dealing with a lot of the same problems. I think the economics are maybe a little bit different, in parts of Europe where the margins, can be tight in certain markets. So I'm learning even from country to country, that's vastly different. And I guess that's in some ways similar to the States, right? Where, in Orlando, you've mentioned about, that what property managers are able to charge is vastly different than what some of the other bigger markets are. So,
and that's one of the small areas of, we've got laws and regulations, and everything does seem to change.
Yeah.
What's interesting is listening to property managers from one country to another, and even one region to another, is very similar to the conversations that we have in the United States, and how you approach those challenges, and then how you start to work with your local authorities and some of the solutions that they've created. Because talking to people like Manuel, for example, that's starting the association down in Mexico, he's learning from what we've created in the United States and the evolution of that to the European market, and so it's starting to feel like a bigger community,
a global community.
Exactly,
and maybe that's
the place that we're coming.
Maybe that's the biggest takeaway, which is, for all of our differences, we're much more alike than we are different. I mean, we're dealing with the same problems, and we're looking at a lot of the same solutions.